Hello and welcome to News Central Now. I am Dapo Adigboye. The top stories at this hour. President Bola Tinubu returns to Nigeria after 2 weeks abroad. Nigeria's House of Representatives denies bribery claims by Binance officials. Kenya declares Friday public holiday in honor of flood victims. Details in a moment. We begin the news at this hour in Nigeria, where President Bola Tinubu has returned to Abuja after spending 2 weeks abroad. The president returned to his official residence at the Aso Villa in Abuja in the early hours of Wednesday. The presidency had departed Abuja for the Netherlands on the 23rd of April 2024 for a 3-day official visit, honoring an invitation from the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. In a tweet on Tuesday, Tinubu's Special Advisor on Information and Strategy, Bayo Ononuga, said while in the Netherlands, the president participated in the Nigerian-Dutch Business and Investment Forum, which brought together heads of conglomerates and organizations in both countries. The Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project has given the federal government 48 hours to withdraw a 0.5% cybersecurity levy imposed on Nigerians. This is contained in a statement on its official X handle. SERAP threatened to drag the federal government to court if the unlawful directive by the Central Bank of Nigeria is not withdrawn. The Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, had in a circular on Monday directed banks to levy a 0.5% cybersecurity charge on electronic transactions, effective from May 20th, 2024. The CBN clarified that the levy would be reflected on the customer's account as cybersecurity levy and applied at the point of electronic transfer origination, then deducted and remitted by the financial institution. Earlier, senior manager and lead ESG and climate change services at Anderson, Temitope Kolade, was on the news and shared his thoughts.
I think for banking institutions, it's not meant to impact their operational expenses as much, particularly because there are clear exemptions in the Act and in the provisions of the Act, and includes things around intra-bank transfers, things around transactions involving banks' internal accounts, suspense accounts, clearing accounts, and all of that. So expectedly, it shouldn't impact on the bank's operations in themselves. But when it comes to other businesses, apparently it would, except for the fact that there are also exemptions when it comes to things around salary payments and loans and all of those, right? But in terms of, I think it's down to individuals and the sort of the businesses that would have to make some value transactions, and then you have to be paying maybe about 5,000 on a million for every transfer that you make, and that could be a lot going forward with all other transaction costs that's people already suffer.
Still on this matter, of course, today on the conversation, we will be having the Deputy Director of SERAP, Oluwadari Kolade, to talk about this by 5 p.m. Stick around for that. Now, still on the news, the House of Representatives has denied demanding a bribe from the Binance Group following a recent allegation by the cryptocurrency company. This is as the House has also resolved to launch an investigation into the escape of the Binance executive from the National Security Advisor's custody in March. Binance had on Tuesday stated that some unknown persons in Nigeria demanded huge payments in digital currency to make their problems in the country go away. The company had pointed out that its representatives were approached after leaving a meeting with the House Committee on Financial Crimes. To politics now. The River State's government has dismissed a call on the State House of Assembly by the Caretaker Committee of the All Progressives Congress in the state to commence impeachment proceedings against Governor Sim Fubara. Commissioner for Information Joseph Johnson said the governor would not allow anyone to throw the state into anarchy. The leader of the Pan-Niger Delta Forum, Edwin Clark, and other prominent individuals in the region have also warned the lawmakers against causing anarchy in the state. The APC Caretaker Committee chairman in the state, Tony Okocha, had on Tuesday called on the 27 members of the State House of Assembly loyal to the FCT minister, Nyesom Wike, to immediately commence an impeachment process against Fubara. Let's move to health matters now, where the burden of dementia is rising in Africa. An estimated 2.13 million persons were living with dementia in sub-Saharan Africa as of 2015, with numbers projected to nearly double every 20 years, increasing to 3.48 million by 2030 and 7.62 million by 2015. Now, recently at a regional hybrid training organized by the African Dementia Consortium, a consultant neurologist at UCH Ibadan, Dr. Temitope Farumbi, highlighted the importance of understanding dementia beyond just memory loss. She joins us right now on the news to share valuable insight on the complexities of this condition and its impact on individuals and families, as well as how they can be better supported when affected. Of course, joining me right now in the studio to unbundle this is Dr. Farumbi. Thank you for joining me on the news.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now let's, of course, lay the groundwork. Can you start by explaining what exactly dementia is and how it differs from the Alzheimer's, thank you, Alzheimer's disease. Pretty much a mouthful there.
Thank you very much. Dementia is the disease of the brain that affects our memory, the way we think, the way we behave, and our emotions. And it's largely the leading cause of disability in the older adults, and often make them to be dependent on their loved ones. I mentioned it's a disease of the brain, and not just the disease of the brain, it makes them to be dependent on their loved ones. So basically, that's a general overview of what dementia is. Oftentimes, it's often confused with aging. When someone starts losing memory or their thought line or thought pattern, you say, maybe I'm getting old. No, that's a very wrong conception, misconception regarding aging. Dementia is not synonymous with aging. It is a disease of the brain, and it affects the older adults more.
Okay, so dementia, like you mentioned, you said is not synonymous with aging, but a disease of the brain. So how can this disease be contracted? Is it hereditary? Is it blood, found in bloodlines? I mean, can you just give us a bit into the origin of this particular disease, and if at all, it's transferable?
It's not transferable. It is not a contagious disease, but it is a non-communicable disease that affects just the brain alone, and then how the brain functions generally. The cause is largely being investigated, but of course we've seen different pathological signs that they've picked up in the brain, like tangles in the brain neurons that allow, in a simple term, when you have electrical wiring in your house, and then perhaps in between those wiring there is a cut, such that there is a poor transmission. The way you transmit electricity, that's the same way the neurons in the brain also transmit information across the different domains of the brain. So here, so you cannot say this is actually the cause at the moment. It's still largely being investigated. However, there are risk factors, things that can make someone to be liable, to be susceptible to developing dementia. Number one is aging. As one grows older, the risk of developing dementia is higher. I said it's commoner among the older adults, but of course 10% of it is seen in those who are less than 60 years. Like I said, it's a disease of that, and also is commoner in females. So a female is likely to develop dementia twice as much as a male counterpart.
Why is that?
One, females tend to live longer than male. I know that's a lot of argument around that. So females tend to live longer than male. And of course, females also bear a lot of emotional stress growing older. One of the things that are protected the female is the estrogen, and in such a way that is kind of like a buoyancy against stress of having to give birth, stress of having to carry babies, and to also carry the family. So we tend to see dementia commoner in female compared to male. So we talked about aging, we talked about gender, in this case, female gender. And beyond that also, and these are non-modifiable. You can't do anything about your age, you can't do anything about your gender. But there are other non-communicable diseases that can increase the risk of dementia, and that's hypertension. Why that is very important is that we now have the incidence of hypertension getting to a pandemic level, even in Nigeria, where you have 1 in 4 persons at age 25 and above having hypertension, and 75% of them don't even know. So you carry this non-communicable disease for a long time untreated, and then these have its deleterious effects on the brain. Okay.
I mean, you said quite a number of things, but I just wanted you to be pretty much also dig a bit deeper. You talked about age being a factor. So can you give an age bracket when one should maybe just be on the conscious lookout?
Yes.
You know, most likely people that may be prone to it, at what age should they start getting conscious? And what are those signs and symptoms, obvious signs and symptoms they should look out for? I mean, in addition to that, also in Africa, as in many other underserved, population, additional strains on dementia care exist. But I also want you to speak specifically to the gradual erosion of the key informal care system, such as, the multi-generational family structures, which are the bedrock of dementia care. So
thank you very much. Okay, regarding the age, we say 60 and above. So anyone who is 60 and above is at increased risk. And for every 10-year increase in age, increases the risk. So the person who is 60 and above, we say, okay, perhaps 1 in 4 person could develop dementia. But when you attain the age of 70, it can increase to 2 in 4 persons, and 85 as you go older. So 60 and above. But so that is that about aging. You talked about family structures, right?
Yes, and also symptoms, obvious symptoms to look out for.
Yes, the obvious symptoms that you often get is memory loss. Of course, it's normal as people grow older, you can have reduction in the latency period by which you recall things. But if at the point that it gets worse, that you start losing your memory for everything you do normally, perhaps, and then you have to repeat words, and then you want to talk and you are finding it difficult to even find the word. We say the word finding difficulties. Example, when you talk about a cup, and then instead of saying a cup, you start saying something that we used to drink water. And someone tells you something and you completely forget, or you put your valuables, your keys, your car keys to a place, and then you turn the whole house upside down.
And then everybody becomes a suspect.
Yeah, so these are symptoms that once you start experiencing that, once your memory is failing you and it's becoming bothersome to you, that's a red flag for you to also quickly reach out to a doctor. Then another symptoms that is common is you finding your way in space. Let me use the word. Usually you go from a point A to point B, and naturally you won't get to think about it. But then you find your way to point D and you can't find your way back to point A. And that often you see older people getting lost. And then we've had occasions where people had even wandered away and they never found. So these are symptoms of dementia. Also irritability. I talked about the way we think and also the way we behave. You can see someone who is naturally quiet and all of a sudden becomes loquacious and talk a lot, or someone who is loquacious and then reserved, become reserved. So that's also where you see behavioral changes. These are the things that we need to look out for.
All right, Dr. Farumbi, I'm sure we can go on with the science, but we are pressed for time. Quickly, yes. Medical care In practical terms, 30 seconds,
Yes.
what can we do at the family level and, at the advanced level, when it comes to
Yes,
hospitals?
at the family level, the most important thing is to be able to identify the symptoms of dementia. It is often misconstrued for voodoo, witchcraft, or other things that are not medical in nature. So at the family level, identification of symptoms is very important. And then, of course, knowledge, awareness, so that you can support the person living with dementia. Right now, a lot is going on regarding the treatment. We can only manage, we cannot cure dementia. We can manage, and then right now, the system is not built to support even the care of dementia in Nigeria at the moment. Unfortunately, the burden of neurological diseases is said to be going to be 3 times by 2030 compared to what it used to be in the 90s. And then, but as our demographic changes, as people age more, we are not, the healthcare system is not expanding with the aging population. And so they are often being left out. So system-wise, we are not yet prepared. There is no national dementia plan at the moment. Although we have National Senior Citizen Center and they are talking about holistic aging, right. But specifically for dementia and other neurological diseases that affect the elderly is not being addressed at the moment.
All right, thank you so much for your time on the news, Dr. Temitope Farumbi, consultant neurologist at UCH Ibadan. Once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll go on a quick break. When we return, we have more stories. Stay with us. In a move to revamp the education system in the country, Northeast Borno State Governor Babangana Zulum has flagged off the training of nearly 2,000 teachers. The candidates were found to be trainable after the competency test conducted by the authorities. Our correspondent Umaru Kirawa completes the report.
Education remains one of the worst hit sector due to insurgency in Nigeria's northeast. In Borno State alone, over 600 teachers were murdered within the span of 12 years. With so many anomalies in the sector, which are not limited to unqualified teachers, discrepancies in salary, among others at the basic education level. The government now flags off intensive training of teachers across the state at the Wakabiu College of Education in Biu local government area.
There's no any government in the history of Borno State which has actually touched our life like this one. Today, a total of 1,872 teachers have registered for our training session. Among them are 702 SSCE holders to undergo 2 years 6-semester program.
Remain focused and do what is right. As long as everyone we are doing is right, it doesn't matter whether you are alone or everybody is with you.
Governor Zulum highlighted the importance of investing in the professional development of teachers as they are the cornerstone of any successful education system.
This number that are to be trained here in Wakabiu form part of the 6,227 teachers that were considered trainable during the last competency test analysis.
A wannan gwamnatin duk education secretaries a yi musu mota an ajiye musu kuɗi saboda a kula da yaran mu kusan biliyan abun da ta faruwa a Borno ba.
The state government will convert the teachers who perform poorly during the training to non-academic staff instead of retrenching them.
All the trainees will receive 30,000 naira on a monthly basis for the 3 months, and even those that will be trained for 2 years will receive an allowance scholarship of 30,000 naira on a monthly basis. That means government will be spending 300 million naira on a monthly basis for this training.
The aim is to equip the teachers with the necessary expertise they need to deliver engaging and effective lessons, ultimately improving learning outcomes for students across the state. In Biu for News Central, Umaru Kirawa.
Following the recent protest against the new ticketing payment policy of the Abia State government by keke operators, the authorities say enough tax grace was given to the commercial motorcyclist. The State Commissioner for Information and Culture, Oke Kanu, made this known while fielding questions from journalists during the weekly ESCO briefing. News Central's Chinwe Ugele tells us more.
During the briefing, the Commissioner for Information, Prince Okekano, stated some decisions taken by the Executive Council.
That policy mandates all internet service providers and mobile network operators to immediately cease all excavations on our roads and to deploy fiber optics until an SPV is selected to harmonize the process.
However, after the briefing, journalists confronted him with questions solely on the protest of keke operators in Umuahia. His response and those of his colleagues are such that suggests that it is the government's decision to get the keke operators pay weekly levies.
That's not the way to compliment the government and show some level of compassion with keke riders. Recall what the Fedman said, and you all are aware of it, that for about 6 months of this administration, nobody bothered them. That was a way to help them.
It's not just enough to complain that everything, no matter how sound or good the policy is, as long as it doesn't have to do with don't pay money. That's the only one you want to hear, don't pay money. But anything that has to do with sanity, you do not want to hear it. So, but like here, the Ghana DG has said, everything will be reviewed. We will continue to interact with them. We will find a common ground that will be good for everyone.
Keke operators on Monday during their protest questioned the rationale behind the policy to make weekly remittances to the state coffers.
We are buying a ticket from 200 naira to 250, from 250 to 300 to 350. Automatically change. That is every week, which is the status is 2,000 naira. But bear it in mind, it's not, and everybody is working daily.
Although the government says it has shown enough mercy for the keke riders in the past, there is still need for it to look into the demands of the operators who constitute 90% of intra-city transportation in Umuahia. In Umuahia for News Central, Chinwe Ugele.
Stakeholders in Nigeria are calling for the full implementation of the 2018 Persons with Disability Act, urging for proper inclusion and mainstreaming of people with disability in the country. This came as they launched the Disability Inclusion Compass in Abuja, the nation's capital. Now, News Central's Joshua Imarayi has this to say.
There is nothing about us without us was the rallying cry as stakeholders advocated for the rights of people with disabilities in Nigeria. They emphasized that despite these challenges, individuals with disabilities constitute a significant demography, thus their rights should be considered a high priority.
The exclusion of persons with disability is so obvious in this country that most of us are being stigmatized. We are being excluded from programs and activities. So this workshop is going to throw more light to stakeholders and right holders that persons with disabilities has every fundamental right like every other person without disability. So basically what this workshop is all about is to educate the stakeholders and the general public to know that persons with disabilities also have their own individual and unique ability to contribute positively to the society.
In 2018, Nigeria signed the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Act, a landmark legislation protecting the rights and well-being of individuals with disabilities. However, with only 13 states having domesticated the act, stakeholders urge full implementation to ensure inclusivity and mainstreaming of people with disabilities in Nigerian society.
The act actually gave persons with disabilities that leeway for them to take up litigations if they couldn't access some physical structures around. So, but for us, persons with disability, we don't really want to go towards that way. So we expect government to begin to do something to ensure compliance of that law.
Stakeholders also emphasize the importance of utilizing the disability community to boost the nation's workforce.
It's very obvious that persons with disabilities have potentials, and we need to tap into that. when we ignore them, what we're simply doing, we are depleting the workforce of the nation. We are not tapping into what they can do. There are creativities that we need to look into. There are things they are doing that we need to support and ensure that the society is benefits from this talent and abilities that they have. Yeah.
They are also calling on citizens to show respect to persons living with disabilities and shun acts of discrimination. In Abuja for News Central, I am Joshua Imarayi.
Coming up on the news, public holiday declared to honor Kenya flood victims. You have details of this and more after the break. The African Union has condemned the Israeli military's move into southern Gaza's Rafah. Now, AU Commission Chief, that's Musa Faki Mahamat, in a statement expressed extreme concern at the war undertaken by Israel in Gaza, which results at every moment in massive deaths and systemic destruction of the conditions of human life. He called on the entire international community to effectively coordinate collective action to stop what he described as a deadly escalation of the war. The United Nations and Israel's staunchest ally, the United States, both condemned the closure of the crossing, which are a lifeline for civilians facing looming famine. Kenya has declared this Friday as a national holiday to remember those who died from the ongoing floods, and the country as well as for Kenyans to plant trees. More than 200 persons have already died from the severe flooding across the country, with more than 250 million affected by the situation. President William Ruto said on Wednesday that the day will allow Kenyans to plant trees to mitigate against the effects of climate change, which has been held responsible for the severe floods. The government's spokesperson, Isaac Morwara, had called on the special notice would be issued designating Friday as a National Tree Growing Day. He said the Environment Minister would later give further directions on the matter. The United Nations has voiced concern after dozens of cases of cholera were reported in Kenya, which has been hit by weeks of destructive rains and floods. The World Health Organization on Wednesday said 44 cases of the disease has been reported in Tana River County in eastern Kenya, one of the areas hardest hit by widespread flooding. According to the latest government figures, flooding in Kenya has killed 238 persons, while more than 200,000 have been homeless. Overall, the heavier than usual seasonal rains compounded the El Nino weather phenomenon, which claimed the lives of more than 400 persons in East Africa, a region highly vulnerable to climate change. The South African Electoral Commission has rejected a request to remove former President Jacob Zuma as the leader of the newly formed MK party. It was responding to a letter by founder of the MK party, Jabulani Khumalo, who wanted the commission to remove Zuma as the face of the party and from its list of potential members of parliament. Khumalo, who was recently expelled from the party, said Zuma fraudulently occupies the position as leader of the party. But in a statement on Tuesday, the Independent Electoral Commission said it does not interfere with party's internal political affairs and confirmed that Zuma remained a registered leader of the MK party. 8 bodyguards of South Africa's Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, are back in court for pre-trial proceedings. Now, they were involved in a blue light mafia assault last year. The men face 11 charges and are currently out on R10,000, that's a 10,000 rand bail, Now, the charges include assault, malicious damage to property, defeating the ends of justice and pointing a firearm. The former VIP Presidential Protection Unit officers were filmed assaulting off-duty soldiers on the side of N1 highway in 2023.
Good afternoon, Mazino, and also good afternoon to our viewers. As you can see my background, we are at the Randburg Major Street Court, where the Democratic Alliance and civil organizations, civil activists are here just to register their concerns. The story that have been running, we know we ran this story at our TV last year when 8 bodyguards for Deputy President Paul Mashatile assaulted a soldier that was not on duty in N1. And this story made the headlines not only here in South Africa, but also on international news. But today they are back here at the Magistrate Court in Randburg here today. And with me, I'm with the Democratic Alliance Shadow Minister of Police, just to tell us their concerns as a party. And good afternoon, sir. Thank you for joining us here at News Central.
Thank you very much for having me.
What are your concerns, especially when you see those that are supposed to be law enforcement and they are breaking the law?
Well, it's completely unacceptable. We've got a culture of impunity within the South African police service, which is driven by corrupt and criminal political leaders in South Africa who are not doing what is required to keep us safe. The Constitution is very clear in terms of Section 205, which is what mandates SAPS and directs them on how to keep us safe. And SAPS is basically admitting that they cannot keep us safe, and they take it one step further. In this case, in the Blue Light Mafia that we are here to attend this trial today, you can see that this is a police service which has now taken the law into its own hands in the sense of dispensing violent, what they would call justice, to innocent bystanders. People who are driving their car down the road can be forced off the road, not just forced off the road, but violently assaulted and attacked and beaten with guns drawn, pointed at them. We cannot allow that situation to...
A new report from the BBC has painted a concerning picture for oceans, as analysis reveals that global sea temperatures have broken records every single day for the past year, fueled primarily by climate change. This extreme heat wave is having a devastating impact on marine life, with some areas experiencing the worst coral bleaching events ever recorded. Scientists say the culprit is greenhouse gas emissions, but the natural phenomenon El Niño has also contributed to the warming seas. For decades, oceans have acted as safeguard for climate change, absorbing vast amounts of heat and carbon dioxide. However, this latest data shows they may be reaching a tipping point, as experts express worry about the rising sea surface temperatures. Since March last year, average surface temperatures have skyrocketed, reaching a record high in August. The situation hasn't improved in recent months, with February and March of this year seeing new daily highs. Now I'm joined on the news to shed more light on this by our international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Afia, tell us, what seems to be causing the oceans to warm up in this way?
Well, the world's oceans for a long time have been sort of described as a get out of jail free card for the Earth, because the world's oceans absorb a quarter of the carbon dioxide that is emitted by humans, and soak up about 90% of the excess heat. And for a long time, the world's oceans have been able to cope with that. Nothing really has happened until now, until we are seeing this phenomenon where the world's oceans have been heating up and are struggling to cope. So from March 2023, the average surface temperature of global oceans started to climb further and further above the long-term norm, and hitting that new record high in August. Recent months have brought no respite whatsoever, and these temperatures keep rising. And it's clear that the amount of man-made emissions, the carbon dioxide and the heat that is emitting on the Earth by these man-made emissions is finally starting to affect the oceans.
Now, what has been the effect on marine life?
Well, this is absolutely catastrophic for marine life. You talked about coral bleaching there, and that is something that's been seen in oceans all across the world. And it's also been devastating for penguins. You know, we've seen incidences where you've had polar ice caps melting and you've had mass drowning events of these kind of penguins that are stuck on this ice. The ice melts very suddenly, very quickly. It breaks, it goes into the ocean, and you have thousands and thousands of these animals drowning. And that is absolutely terrible. If the oceans are rising so much, the temperatures, excuse me, are rising so much, they're melting the ice caps and literally killing the animals. And like I said, the coral reef bleaching, the reef bleaching that's happening in reefs all over the ocean is also, you know, a terrible, terrible instance. These coral reefs that have been there for millions of years are being bleached, their color is being taken away, and they're being very badly damaged. So now it's affecting marine life and coral life, and that's exactly what we do not want to see.
Now, what part does the El Nino weather effect, play in warming up of the world's oceans?
Well, El Nino has been in play for some time. We have had El Nino since about June last year. It kicked into gear, peaked in December, and it's kind of been fading away. And before that, we had El Nina, which is the cooler effect. El Nino makes the world warm up, as it were. And oceans aren't really usually affected by El Nino. They usually, like I said, get a jail-free card, just carry on as it is. And so scientists have been trying to work out what's going on. But now you have this large patch of warmer than usual water in the tropical Atlantic, and the main development of that is tropical cyclones. Now these are sort of the short-term impacts, but now we're seeing long-term impacts as well. Like I said, ice sheets melting, those mass drowning events, and deep ocean warming. That's what part El Nino now is playing, and the fact that it's affecting the oceans means that El Nino is becoming stronger, but also our oceans are becoming weaker. And so in terms of global warming, in terms of trying to keep the Earth from warming 1.5 degrees, this is a very, very bad sign.
All right, Tafiya, thank you for your time. In response to the Cybercrime Act amendment, the Central Bank of Nigeria has instructed banks, mobile money operators, amongst others, to implement a 0.5% levy on specific electronic transactions. We have details of this after this break. Just continue.
At least from my own perspective, it is more of a fee to contribute to the fund. And what is important to note is that this is actually just one of the sources of the funding of the National Cybercrime National
Fund.
Security National Fund. Exactly, National Cybersecurity Fund.
Yes.
The other forms of funding that fund. So this Cybercrime Act has recommended that this cybersecurity levy be applied to financial institutions, but it is just one of the 4 ways that fund is being funded. Now, the goal is what is important here, the intention of the fund. The fund is what is going to, the fund is basically to fund the Office of the National Security Advisor. The Office of the National Security Advisor is primarily responsible for the protection of, data, the cyberspace of Nigerians. So I understand the sentiment from where you're coming from in terms of, looking at the state of the macro economy. There's already a lot of fees here and there. There's a lot of taxes, and this is another one, in addition to some of the fees that the banks already charge to the customers today. But for this one in particular, there's an end in sight, and that is what we have to keep in mind. It is not just a way to tax. There's no crime that has been committed. It is basically contribution that is being aggregated by participating institutions to fund the office, some of the projects of the Office of the National Security Advisor towards combating and protecting the cyberspace of the country, and also prohibiting cybercrimes that is growing significantly in the country.
Telecom companies in Nigeria are concerned that the construction of the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway could damage undersea cable crucial for internet connectivity. The project could disrupt international communications and uplink facilities. The telcos are urging the Ministry of Works to consult with them and take steps to avoid cable damage. Muyiwa Salami, Associate Director at the Anderson, Nigeria, has shared insights on preventing similar incidents.
I think even based on the Constitution of Nigeria, right, the whole land belongs to the federal government. At the end of the day, yes, permits are given, surveys are done, but if you look at, what will be the impact to the general populace, right, and what will be the long-term benefits as well. Sometimes we have to let go, as the case may be, to say that yes, we have to do this sort of project, and I would say that due compensation should be given to those that are really affected by this project, right? And and also ensure that going forward we have the right course, and if something has been put to paper, let us establish that this is how it's going to be done going forward. So that will be the advice to both those affected as well as
South Africa's derivatives market is transitioning to a new interest rate benchmark called Zaronia for short-term loans. Zaronia, based on real transaction, replaces previous benchmark JIBAR, aiming to enhance transparency and reduce risk. This shift aligns with the global trend away from manipulable benchmarks. A full rollout on other markets is planning for 2025. With JIBAR phasing out by 2026, economist Feliza Nkomo shared insights on the derivatives market and the reasons behind this revamp.
I think what the Reserve Bank is actually following is the whole restructuring within the financial markets. So I think different countries have really been following this. So you would know, for example, that we've seen, even from a banking perspective, new regulation around the capital reserve requirements. And this is the sector that has really not been partly been paid attention to, particularly with the introduction of cryptocurrency. So I do think that every country is trying its best to make it sure that it's not vulnerable, but also there are less errors, but fundamentally that data gets tested well, that's what in the Zaronia context has actually really happened. So in essence, because also the derivative market is actually a very volatile market. You had the point I was making earlier that one of the derivatives that is quite popular in South Africa around the over-the-counter sales derivative, it's the cheaper, which is actually 3 months. That's quite volatile. So we have 3 months, we have 6 months, we have 9 months, and then we have 12 months. And there's several of those. So what South African government is actually, Central Bank is doing is that it's actually staggering the changes or the reforms that it's introducing within this market. In that now it's introducing this first Zanera, there's going to be the next forms of other. It's going to, for example, it's going to do away with other derivatives. For example, the derivatives called Sanex and with the other 2 derivatives. So they're actually, Zanera is actually going to be now the main reference rate that is actually going to be used going forward.
The Nigeria Basketball Federation has given praise to the Rivers Hoppers over their impressive performances at this year's Basketball Africa League. The NBBF, in a statement, described the efforts by the Rivers Hoppers as very impressive and a true reflection of the ongoing efforts of the NBBF to develop the game in the country. The Kingsmen were winners of the 2023 NBBF Premier League and have proven to be worthy representatives of Nigeria with the outstanding performances so far, winning 3 in 3 games in the Basketball Africa League. Let's also tell you that Andy Murray plans to make his comeback from injury at the Geneva Open this month and is aiming to participate in the French Open, likely for the last time. The former world #1, a 3-time Grand Slam winner, received a wild card for the clay court event in Switzerland starting on May 18th. Mori, 36, sustained ankle ligament damage at the Miami Open in the late March and chose not to undergo surgery to expedite his recovery, with hopes of featuring at Roland Garros, Wimbledon and the Paris Olympics this summer. Eyeing a final Wimbledon appearance, he intends to commence his grass court preparation at Stuttgart on June 3rd. The Wimbledon kicks off on July 1st, followed by the Olympics on July 26th, while the US Open begins on August 26th in New York. And that's a wrap on the news at this time. But before we go, another look at some of our top stories. We told you that President Bola Tinubu returns to Nigeria after 2 weeks abroad. Nigeria's House of Representatives denies bribery claims by Binance officials. And finally, we also told you that Kenya declares Friday public holiday in honor of flood victims. Don't forget to send in your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen. You can also follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can, of course, watch us live across these platforms: DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Apple TV, and YouTube. And thanks for watching. I am Dakbo Adigboyi.